Aravind Tulasidaran, Accessibility in Salesforce.
Okay, hope you're having fun. Lots of great sessions today, yeah? All right. Working for the design. So, if I had $1 for every time someone said this, I would be a millionaire by now. And I come from a very peculiar species of software developer. So, I myself have said this line one too many times. But one fine day, a dear friend, someone I look up to, she told me that, well, Arvind, the design sucks. So that was a wake-up call for me. Initially, that came across as quite a shock to me, but eventually I understood why one might say that after putting myself in the shoes of users who interacts with the system in many different ways. So over the time, I've realized that accessibility is not about doing a favor to any particular group of population. It just benefits everyone. And I think Angel mentioned in our keynote today that a good design is always accessible. And accessibility is certainly not about doing something extra. You know, even Santiago mentioned, he put it very well that you don't need to fix people, just fix the problems. So besides the legal and moral obligations, we know that providing accessible digital products, it's only going to improve your business in terms of increased sales, your reputation, and workforce diversity. So to me, accessibility is simply the right thing to do, and I'm sure that many people here would resonate with me. You might have come across accessibility in web pages, but how do you fit that into a customer relationship management system, that is a CRM? So a CRM is merely a software or a tool that you use to manage your customers' data and then track all your interactions with them. Today we are going to be looking at the world's #1 CRM, the Salesforce. I'm going to pause here for a moment and give a disclaimer that I'm not a brand ambassador of Salesforce. So I've worked with other legacy CRM systems, and I mean, accessibility was not even in the picture. So while Salesforce is taking major steps to provide a most accessible product, the responsibility still falls all over our shoulders. When we build solutions using Salesforce, we still need to ensure that we deliver it in the most accessible way. So how many of you here are from the Salesforce ecosystem? Anyone? Cool. Are you? Awesome. Interesting. So what is Salesforce? Think of it like an Excel sheet. You organize your customers' data into objects and records instead of tabs and rows. And all of this is stored in the cloud. So you don't have to know the complete architecture in detail if you're going to be looking at just the accessibility aspects of it. So it's a pre-built metadata using HTML and CSS. You just need to know where and how you should customize it. Salesforce comes in two different versions. The one is the classic. It's being the slightly older version. And you need to manually activate the accessibility mode in the classic version. If you go to the Lightning experience, it's the latest version, and it's more intuitive, interactive, and the accessibility features are automatically activated for you. So you don't need to do manually anything. And think of Lightning experience as a business class, and your classic version as the premium economy. So I think, Kim, that answers your question. I met Kim earlier today in the break. So let's just briefly look at some of the basic responsibilities of some of the roles in the Salesforce ecosystem. I'm going to be sharing some tips on how to be successful in implementing the accessibility features. So how do you code for accessibility? I'm starting with the developers because it's one of my favorite ones. And I might be a bit biased considering my link to this particular species. So there are two major places where you can code. One is the Visualforce page, and the other is the Lightning Component Framework. So a Visualforce page is like a standard web page. Let me open up the application and show that to you. All right. So you go to your Salesforce application, and in the setup, you go to the quick find box. You can type in Visualforce. And it shows up here. So Visualforce is a tag-based markup language. It's similar to that of the HTML. It uses the Apex tags to create pages, forms, sections, etc. And you can mix it a bit with HTML and CSS attributes as well. So usually a developer or a solution architect would suggest to go for Visualforce page whenever you need a custom UI solution in place. So you can use Visualforce pages to override the standard Salesforce pages or buttons that comes by default. And in short, Visualforce pages are your best friends when it comes to fixing the accessibility standard issues. The next major framework is the Lightning component. So you can again go to your setup and go to developer console. You would create something called as a Lightning component. It can be anything like a calendar or a form. And you go to file, you create a new Lightning component. It can be a page or a quick action. So once you're done with your coding inside this Lightning component framework, so Lightning component framework is a set of pre-built components, and it uses the standard styling guides that Salesforce provides. Once you've created your components, you go back to your application, and there's something called as Lightning App Builder. And you can go to the dashboard where you can actually build a single page web application in Salesforce, both for mobile and desktop. You can select any standard template that comes. So you get to see the standard Lightning components that appear here, like the chatter feed, etc. used to chat with your partners or customers. And the custom components that you create will show up here. So in both the Visualforce and the Lightning components, semantic markup is the base. It makes your content more readable and accessible to the assistive technologies. Okay. And on top of the semantic attributes, you would be also using the same ARIA principles that you apply in the regular web pages. So you would use a combination of roles, states, and properties. So when you're using an ARIA role, you would essentially be giving a semantic meaning to the non-semantic elements. Let's say to distinguish the elements as buttons, links, etc. And if you're going to specify a div tag as a button in the role, you need to ensure that you make it function that way. Let's take an example here. You come across a coffee shop and they clearly have mentioned that they are a coffee shop in their name. And you go inside and you order a coffee and they tell you that, sorry mate, we don't sell coffee here. So if you use an improper ARIA tag like this, it will lead you to such situations. Don't be using the role coffee in your code. It's not a valid value. And There is also the ARIA states which gives you the current status of the object. So let's say if you want to know a menu is expanded or whether a checkbox is checked or unchecked, then you need to have the ARIA states. Let's take this same example. You come across the same shop, you see that the coffee shop name is mentioned and there's a door sign that they are open. So you go inside and you try to order a coffee and they say, can you maybe come back later? We are closed at the moment. Probably not as ridiculous as the previous example, but still you have a cranky customer who has not had their morning coffee yet. And the last thing is the ARIA properties. It describes the nature of the object. Example, a select tag with multiple attributes. I'm sorry I ran out of coffee examples for this one. I can hear someone at the back saying, thank God he's done. All right. Next up is the Lightning Design System. So Salesforce provides you a set of HTML and CSS blueprints that you can take advantage of. So as a developer, if you want to identify the proper ARIA role states and properties as well as the other semantics, you can just refer to this and you can use it as a reference. So as you can see here, each of the different components have their own blueprint. You can try to leverage that. And these style sheets are automatically included in your Lightning components. But if you're going for the Visualforce page, you need to manually set the Lightning style sheets attribute as true. And then only you will be able to access it. So there's one more thing that I'd like to share about the Lightning Components framework. There are two different types of Lightning components. One is the Aura components, and the other is the Lightning Web components. So the Aura components are slightly the older version, and do not use the UI and force namespaces because they are no longer the accessible components. Instead, use Lightning namespace. So when you're writing a Lightning component, you need to always associate the labels with their input values for the assistive technologies to better understand. You should also be setting the required as true if it needs to be understood in a better accessible way. And there is an instance where the developers could be a bit proactive by using the ARIA live region. So if you want something to be shown dynamically, let's say for example, new navigational items have been added to the page. So a show more option for this, you need to be using the ARIA live region to let the user know about the context change. There's a quick hack that I'd like to share about the global HTML attributes when you're building the Lightning Web components. So if you're going to be setting the ARIA described by attribute at the host level, it will render like this. And what it does is the framework, it assumes the ARIA described by as an API name, something other than an ARIA attribute, and it applies it twice. So when your screen reader is reading this example, it will announce the Alicamp description twice. Sounds like a bug, right? But there is a way around this. Try to use camel case in the ARIA described by if you're going to specify it at the Lightning Web Component host level. So when you do that, your screen reader will be able to recognize it properly. So there is another example of using the semantics in Lightning components. Just stay with me, guys. I promise this is the last coding reference in the slide. So if you're going to create an unordered list, say using the UL tag, and in this example, the screen reader won't be able to recognize it because every UL tag by the standard HTML semantics should be having the LI tags as a child under it. That is a list. So in this example, the LI is sitting one level down under the Lightning component's own semantic, which is the Lightning list item. So let's get a bit creative here. Get rid of the UL and LI HTML tags. Instead, use the Salesforce markup list and list items. And in addition to that, apply the ARIA roles and make it function as a list and then as a list item. So as promised, I'm putting an end to your misery. No more coding references. All right. So designers and user experience teams, I might get into a lot of trouble for putting them together in one single section, but different organizations operate different ways. So Salesforce comes with their own branding when you get the Salesforce application, but you can customize it for your organization. So when you're doing that, I can show you in the application where you would be essentially doing it. So go back to setup. It's not that the designers would be doing this, it's your developer who would ideally be doing this. So type in branding. And Teams and branding is the one for desktop experience, and Salesforce branding is the one for mobile experience. Let's go to the desktop first. Okay. So this is the default color palette that Salesforce provides you, which is their own branding. If you want, you can pick a different color palette from here. And when you pick a different one, you can see that the underlying color codes, like the page background and the global header background, etc., including the link color, it changes according to that. It's within that range. So notice that there is an option for accessibility override. So don't play around this unless you're absolutely sure that the color palette you're going to use to override is WCAG compliant. Because what's present in this particular color palette is already been verified by Salesforce. And as an additional check, you could always use some online tools. I find that the contrast state checker works well personally. You just need to type in your foreground and background colors and it gives you the results of the contrast ratio. And if you want to go to customize your mobile Salesforce application, you can do so in this Salesforce branding option, where you get to pick the brand color and the loading page color, etc. So use it wisely. Next up is the keyboard focus. So you should be able to determine the exact value of tab index. Sometimes the default value of 0 is not enough. So you should be able to collaborate with your developers and change the value if required. And if the user is going to zoom in on the Salesforce page from different devices, you might want to test it by using your own browser setting to 200%. Because sometimes the developers need to fix the underlying code. From the Salesforce Design Lightning System blueprints, they provide a dedicated print for the Android and iOS respectively. Next up is the product owners. So accessibility requirements are a priority for you. So make sure that every bit of information is at the granular level as possible. And you should be able to dictate the logical tab order. It should be per the normal reading order. So there's a link here. There's a link here to go to the W3AG website, and the link will be provided to you after this conference. You should also be able to determine when skip links are needed so that users who use pointer device or screen readers can jump to the main content. make sure to use plain language as much as possible. You shouldn't be using alt text for decorative images. And if you're going to upload videos, you should source it from a website that is already having the CC. So that is a closed captions. Your developer would ideally include that iframe HTML code into the rich text area of the Salesforce visual page. So if you are a Salesforce administrator or a champion, you will likely be training end users. And this is one of the suggestions from Salesforce to go with this particular mode. So if you are navigating the page, go with the virtual mode in JAWS and browser mode in NVDA. And if you're interacting with the form controls, use forms mode in JAWS and focus mode in NVDA. There's also a recommended browser screen reader combination here. You can go through it after the link has been shared with you. So you can also find a list of keyboard shortcuts from within Salesforce application. So if you press Control plus / when you're there on the application, it gives you a list of shortcuts. You can share that list with your end users, so it makes their job easier. Testers and quality engineers, you guys have the toughest job. So don't rely on just one single testing method. Use a combination of different things and always ensure to provide actionable recommendations and not just a plain report of the issues. So you should be stating what WCAG requirement you are testing and how it benefits people. Leadership, you need to ensure that you promote an inclusive culture, and you should not see accessibility as an overhead. So there are these are some of the supported tools that works well with Salesforce. You can try leveraging them. This is not a definitive list. You can still, try to do your research and find out more on the other tools. So Salesforce, you can email any queries to them, and for accessibility issues, for using accessibility at salesforce.com. They also publish something called as the voluntary product accessibility template, which is an audit of their product, which states how well they conform to the accessibility standards. And there is also a list of known issues which is documented in the Lightning experience. You can go through them to understand what you can expect from day one. So the links are present in the end of the slides. You will get it after the conference. So the key takeaways from the session is use Lightning experience to get the most accessibility features from Salesforce, and use Visualforce to fix standard accessibility issues, take advantage of the Lightning design system, and support each other in your roles towards a common goal. So in summary, Salesforce has laid out a good foundation, but there's no silver bullet. You still need to make sure that you need to deliver it in the most accessible way. So the change begins with you. Thank you.